Welcome everybody here. We're all used to talking about clinical practice and medicine and doing the right thing by our patients and all the rest of it, but today we're talking about business. But before we get onto that, just remember this one thing. Good practice is good business. So whatever else you do, you're not off the hook. You've still got to look after your patients. So I'm going to be talking today about what's on the menu. What is on the menu? Everybody's different practice, different personality, different people, different things that they're trying to do and trying to sell. I'm not going to give you any clear-cut answers to that. But what I am going to do is to give you a little bit of a reflection on my practice. Now, the difference with my practice is that we started over 30 years ago, right at the very dawn of the age of civilization almost, as far as cosmetic practice was concerned. We'll talk a little bit about how I set things up and why I thought about it, what we did. It may not translate to current times, but maybe you'll get some gems out of that. We had to remember that we had no templates back then, because we really couldn't look around to the rest of the medical community and find out what they were doing, because this was all so new. The very first filler that came to Australia was back in the early 90s. I think it's probably about 90, 91. Could have even been a year or so prior to that. And mine was one of the very first practices in the country that was doing this stuff. We had no templates. We had no guidelines. From a business perspective, we just made it up as we went along. We tried to figure out how are we going to make this whole new practice world work. One of the big things was, well, what did things cost? What do we charge for a patient? How do we ascertain what the market will bear? What should we be charging? It was all new, no guidelines. Initially, we set up in a solo practice. It was just me, and that was the first hurdle. It was just me. You do everything. Fills your time very quickly, makes you very busy very quickly. But the critical thing became, are we doing the right thing? Or am I filling my time and my appointment book with the right things? So there was a little bit of early soul searching, deciding, well, what do I, as an individual, want to do? And how am I going to make this work in a practice context? What happens when you go on holiday? Well, if it's only you, then there's no income. So that made it a very, very expensive holiday. So there was a great incentive for us to get our finances right. So what do? We engaged that time-warm facility of delegation. We had a multiplier effect. The idea, in my mind, was to create a wave of patients coming through the door that might require a number of different things. We try to develop a cross-referral within the practice, so we would leverage our manpower and our woman power. Yes, there was more wages, more consumable costs, but the rent and all the utilities was just the same. So we were already in an improved financial position. We had a more constant income, and to keep it all in perspective, there were less expensive holidays. So you had to be there for the right reason. Less expensive holidays was very important. So our multiplier, what do? My primary practice is facial surgery. But any facial practice is also going to involve toxins, fillers, skin care, laser, and a whole range of other things. And so, to a large degree, I had a synergistic multiplier effect. All of these things would feed off each other. If you had a practice where you did hair, lipo, and maybe a bit of filler here and there, not so synergistic. You can certainly make it work, but there's not a real lot of overlap in those disparate areas. So have your multiplier effect to be synergistic with the key element. Because each facelift patient was likely to become a filler, laser, or skin care patient, or alternatively, the filler laser skincare patients that were coming in were a potential for surgery, like a facelift or blepharoplasty or something. But there's a caveat, and the caveat is if everybody in the team does good work, and if the patients and your staff like you. This is the critical thing. This is a bit of a paradigm change to normal orthodox practice that we had at the time. People had an illness, they would come to see you, you would fix their illness, and then they'd go away. That was it. If you applied that same sort of paradigm to this practice, you're not going to be as successful. What you want is a reason for people to keep coming back to your practice. You can only take an appendix out once, but you can provide a whole range of procedures and treatment packages for a number of people across a range. So, what's on the menu? First, you need to consider what skills that you have and what are the gaps that you as an individual have, and how do you fill those gaps in a synergistic way. You've got to look at your training, you've got to look at your accreditation, and obviously that means continuing training and education. You have to look at your practice infrastructure. What is your practice setup going to be? Is it going to be doctor, nurse, dermal therapist, or doctor, nurse, 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 dermal therapist, or is it going to be nurse, dermal therapist, and a marketer? So what is the practice infrastructure are you going to look for? And that translates into, well, how much floor space do I need? How many rooms do I need? How am I going to manage the patient flow? There's an awful lot of these things that you had to think about. You've got to look at what the market wants. What's the competition? Who else is out there doing this? What is your practice location? And by this, I don't mean in this suburb or that suburb or whatever, but that's important. But the location is, are you in a building that's got good parking? You know, can patients get you to see you without a reasonable fuss? Should you have your clinic within a big shopping centre like Westfields at Bondi? And there's lots of practices in there, good parking, good access, but there's also lots of competition for the dollar that you're looking for your patient to spend. Should you have it in a medical building where you've got a lot of other medical practices around? These were all of the questions that went through my mind when I was trying to set up my cosmetic practice. Insurance is a big one. And with your insurance, you've got to think about professional indemnity. You've got to think about your business insurance. You've got to think about the fact that a business insurance and your professional indemnity are not the same thing. And it's important to get that right, to be sure about that. The people that work in your practice, are they subcontractors or are they employees? Now that's a real trap for the unwary, because subcontractors are different to employees. An employee has an award structure. You have certain criteria that you must meet when you employ somebody. You make sure that you're in the right award. People that are engaged as subcontractors, it's often because you're wanting to obviate some of those entanglements of an employee situation. But if you're a subcontractor, then you need to carry your own professional indemnity insurance. If you're the boss and you're employing somebody to do something, you'll be covered by the employer's business insurance. If you're a subcontractor and something goes wrong and there's a complaint, you're not necessarily covered by the boss's business insurance. You, as an individual, as a subcontractor, may well be liable for the thing that went wrong. So you've got to look at this. Sometimes, just to make it nice and easy, sometimes at law, a subcontractor may still be classed as an employee. So you've got to check all your own arrangements. Now, so far, we haven't talked much about practice at all, have we? We haven't talked a whole lot about business, except to say that these are all the impediments that are in the road before you start putting things together. So if you're employed or you're subcontracting to somebody, have a kind word or a kind thought about the boss. There's an awful lot of things in the back of house that need to be considered. Now, the other things you've got to look for is your barriers to entry, not just for you, but also for your competitors. Now, one of the key elements of that is training. Now, training leads directly into credibility, because it's the credibility that you project to the consumer that is going to determine to a large degree whether or not you have a good business or not so good a business. Personality. What's your personality? What's your staff's personality? What is the personality of the practice? These are all incredibly important issues that most of us give hardly a passing thought to. There are some of us whose personality would probably make them a really good pathologist. It's important. The other really key things, and this is starting to get to the nitty-gritty, is what's the cost of your capital equipment? What does it cost you to actually set up your practice and run your practice? And do you get a return on investment? You'll find lots of people will be talking to you in trade displays about return on investment, but you've got to be able to put this into some sort of a rational context. I break it up primarily into capital costs. What is your practice setup? How much did it cost you to get this set of rooms and to furnish it the way you wish? What is your staff level going to be? Not just on average, but from day to day. Are you going to have enough staff on board to handle the patient flow? What level of stock are you going to keep, and how are you going to buy your equipment? When you're looking at providing a service, each service that you provide in your practice, it'll comprise an element of capital cost and an element of consumable cost. And you need to be aware of the scale of these things in your own individual practice. Now, a simple example is something like a neurotoxin or a filler. Is this a capital cost or is it a consumable cost? Some would say it's a capital cost. You have to go and buy the filler, so you're spending capital to get this product. But then on the other hand, when you provide the service, you're getting full recompense for the cost of that product each time and every time that you provide that service. Now, it's not the same as a laser. You don't get the full cost of the laser back every time you do a service. So there's a capital cost and a consumable cost. Don't forget that in the capital cost, there's some element of practice setup, staff, marketing. One of the other things that I thought about was, well, what's the incremental cost? If we consider just an example, day one, we've got a brand new set of rooms, which cost us just a mere $1 million to set up. That's all, only a small place, set it up fairly nicely, just right. And guess what? Patient number one has cost you $1 million to provide that service for patient number one, the first person that walks through the door on day one. That's your capital cost. But don't worry, things do get better. By the time you hit patient number 10, they've only cost you $100,000 each. You know, life is good. Life is good. What's the incremental cost? Think about it this way. Okay, you've already spent the $1 million. So that's done, that's dusted, it's gone. So each new patient really only costs you the actual cost of the consumable product and the wages, etc., for providing the service at that time. So think about the difference between a capital cost and an incremental cost, because this line of thinking will change the way you view your economics. You just need a lot more patience. That's, at the end of the day, you just need a lot more patience. And some of our following speakers will tell you how to do that. So, still on the incremental cost, once you've purchased the equipment, the cost is the amount you need to spend to perform another treatment. many of the equipments that we have will have a consumable that come with them, like a shot card on a laser or a special attachment for a different sort of machine. And this increases your other consumable costs, meaning your staff wages. But if the machine that you're going to look to buy has got very high consumable cost attached to it for each procedure, then it should be much cheaper as the cost of the item up front. Or you've got to charge a higher fee for that service. So then we come to the next thing. What can this piece of equipment do? What can you charge for it? How many patients does that translate to that is going to pay off the piece of equipment that I've just bought? And how many patients do you need to make this a profitable business? Now, I mentioned before about the consumable cost for a filler. It's very high in proportion to the service. The patient who pays over the counter for their filler, they'll give you back maybe 100% profit on the cost of the filler. Maybe it's more or less in your practice. But the thing is that each time you sell that syringe, you're getting a full recompense for the cost that it bore you to buy that item. Very different to an energy-based device. But you've got to consider how much stock are you going to carry? How much money is going to be sitting on the shelf for you to have the amount of stock, fillers, toxins, or whatever it is that you need to perform these tasks? And with other consumables, how many items of the disposable for machine A, B, or C do you need to carry? Because that's money on the shelf. That's capital that is spent. It's not in your pocket anymore. You don't get to spend it on anything else. You've also got to look at expiry dates. This is going to affect your profitability. And delivery fees. Okay, if you buy something in bulk, you'll get a discount on the price, but you've got a greater quantity of product on the shelf, subject to expiry dates if you can't move it. On the other hand, smaller quantities, higher individual costs, but maybe there's less outstanding on the shelf, but higher delivery fees. Gets a bit confusing, doesn't it? Well, I'm going to make it even more so. Let's consider an example of a significant purchase, whatever it is in your practice. Say it's a laser or some sort of an energy-based device. And let's just say its listed price is $110,000. So remember we were talking about capital cost, how much you're going to spend to buy this bit of equipment. But the thing is that it's not really $110,000 because you'll probably lease it over 4 years, and so its true value to you is $186,000. You might have a maintenance contract, and I've checked with a number of different providers, and maintenance contracts of this sort of order, they are out there. So it means that the listed price of your item was $110,000, but your total cost, what I call the amalgamated cost of your item, is $238,000. So the next question is, how many patients do you need to provide that return on investment? How do you work that out? Okay, first thing you've got to work out, well, what does the equipment do? Let's say it will do a service or a treatment that in the general marketplace you might be able to charge $238 for. So that means that you need to have delivered 1,000 treatments over 4 years to get back your original purchase price of $238,000. That's an average of $250 per year or an average of 5 per week. And if this is what you achieve, it means that you haven't made any profit out of that piece of equipment for 4 years. If you add in your cost of wage and infrastructure, you've actually made a loss. So it's clear that whatever this piece of equipment is, you can't charge $238 for the service. Okay, if that same machine can provide a service that you can charge $2,380 for, then you only need 100 patients over 4 years to cover the cost of the equipment, which is 25 per year or 2 a month, and so that's a much better proposition. So we have to work backwards to find out what you should be paying for a piece of equipment, and having done so, what you need to charge for it so that you can make a profit. Because remember, with this one here, this example that I've just shown you, that's just to get back the cost of the equipment that you have bought. So I came up with my very smart, very wily, very cunning rule of reverse calculation. Suits my personality very well. So step 1, you aim to return your amalgamated purchase price in 25 patients. And I termed that a Class 1A machine. Sometimes, though, a patient might need a series of treatments to get the right outcome. And so if we return our amalgamated purchase price in 25 programs of treatments, I call that a Class 1B machine. And I thought I was getting pretty smart at this stage, so I'm working this out really well. So if you have a similar concept based on 50 patients, it's a Class 2A, 50 programs, Class 2B, and if it's on 100 patients or programs, it's Step 3A or Class 3A or Class B. Confused yet? Hope not. It gets worse. The point is, you're trying to figure out a cost and a return, and you've got to try and figure out, can you charge, will the market bear the charge that's going to give you a return? And this is where you've got to sit down and think about things. So work backwards now from your pricing structure. We talked about a service that might cost $100 for a piece of equipment. If we talk about our Class A1 machines, that means the machine should cost you about $2,500. On my system, if it's a Class 2 machine, it's $5,000, and if it's Class 3 machine, it's $10,000. I can tell you I've never been able to buy a Class 1 machine in my life, but nevertheless, this was my working out. The sweet spot somewhere between Class 2 and Class 3. Now, this system allows for flexibility, so you can plug in your own numbers. You can actually go home, sit down and work out what you're going to buy, what you're going to charge, and you can work out the profitability on the equipment that you've already got, and you can work out the profitability on the potential new purchase. So again, you look at the purchase price, and if the new device costs you, say, $200,000 all up, you can't charge $100 per service because you're going to need 2,000 of them to cover the cost of the machine. You need to charge for a Class 1 machine $8,000, a Class 2 machine $4,000, or a Class 3 machine $2,000. Now, there are lots of machines out there that cost in that 200 bracket, and you can legitimately charge a fee somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000 for. But this was the thinking that led me to buy what I bought, charge what I charge, to try and make a go of it. And remember, this is just to cover the cost of your device. If you're looking to put in a profit there, you've got to rejig the figures. So the clear thing is that, does your device provide a service for which you can charge the amount you need to charge to make a profit? Moving away from that market, definitely towards minimally invasive or non-surgical, reduces barriers of entry. But one of the things that you've got to talk about is your point of difference. What is your point of difference? You've got to think about where you currently get your patients from. Is it your existing patient base? That's a fairly captive market that you can access fairly easily. Word of mouth, best form of marketing I think you can possibly have is word of mouth. But then you have a formalised marketing strategy, and some of our speakers today will talk more about marketing. But remember that marketing is different to advertising. They're not the same things. And what do you market? What is it that you market? Is it the item of equipment? You know, is it the amazing Brand X laser lipo skincare machine with blue flashing lights on it? Is that what you market? Or is it the process? The filler, the laser, the operation, threads? Or is it the result that you market? Fuller lips, slimmer hips, or a fox eye procedure? You need to remember though that marketing, whatever you choose to market, is not the same as advertising. And you need to have a point of difference. Now, the point of difference is you. That's the point of difference. And that's my take-home message today. You have to make yourself or your clinic the point of difference. Not the particular equipment that you carry, not the procedure that you do, because many others will have the same procedures and the same types of equipment on their menus as well. But the thing is that they are not you. Now, what makes the difference between Macca's and Hungry Jack's? They both sell pretty much the same thing. Burgers are better at Hungry Jack's, that's right. But that's an important point, because as Tom's just nailed it, the burgers are better at Hungry Jack's. That's a good marketing slogan, because it makes the point of difference Hungry Jack, not necessarily the burger or the shake or the location. The point of difference. So, do good work, look after your patients, care about your results, and the rest will take care of itself. And at the end of everything, just remember to take the time to smell the roses. Thank you very much.